Time is 9:07, and we will call this meeting of the Texas Appraiser Licensing and Certification Board to order. Today is Friday, December 2nd, 2022, and Mr. Black will lead us in the pledges. We will now have roll call and a discussion and possible action to excuse any board member absences.
Chair Sarah Oates.
Present.
Martha Gill Lynch. Chance Wilson.
Present.
Wade Black.
Present.
Rolando Castro.
Present.
Paola Escalante-Castillo.
Present.
Mark McNally.
Present.
Stephanie Robinson.
Present. Present.
I would request a motion that we excuse Ms. Reed Lynch's absence.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton.
I move that Ms. Reed Lynch be excused from today's meeting. I second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Mr. Castro. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. I would like to open today and note that if any visitors would like to speak, that you must complete a public meetings comment slip, which is either outside the front door or over here at the desk with Dion. We come in from this dreary day, and I just wanted to say, as we gather during this holiday season, that is a festive season, but is also reflective, a time of reflection and gratitude as we close the year out, that I know I speak on behalf of the entire board when I say that we are incredibly grateful for such a wonderful staff that we genuinely enjoy working with, and we greatly appreciate all of your efforts in the last 3 years for the big changes that we have made, and we can all take this wisdom and experiences of yesterday into the way that we serve tomorrow. And so I just wish you all a joyful holiday season and a healthy new year for all of you and your family. Agenda item number 4 is recognition of new and reappointed AMC committee members. And so David Mentasana, his term expired. So Julia Hayes was reappointed to the AMC committee, and Frank Towery of My AMC in Wiley is a new appointment. So those were made since our last board meeting, and we welcome them onto the team. Now is any comments from the general public. If you wish to speak on a matter that's on the agenda, then you can do so at that time. Otherwise, this would be a time to speak on any non-agenda items. And of course, as a reminder to the board, this is not a time of deliberation, as it's not a posted agenda item. We have a request for public comment by Mr. Scott DiBiasio of the Appraisal Institute. Good morning, Scott.
Good morning, everyone. Good to see everyone again. Very quickly, I just wanted to follow up on an issue that we've talked about for several previous board meetings in relation to Perea. And Ms. Santos had reached out to me, I don't know, a month or so ago, about potentially having available a demonstration of our Perea program available for your workshop that you had yesterday. And at the time that she reached out to me, we did not have anything that was available that we could have presented to you all yesterday at your workshop. At this point now, we do have something. It's not exactly a demonstration. It's more of a narrative and some additional information related to our Perea program. But we would be more than happy at this point to make that available to you all as board members and to the staff as well. I just need to work out some details because it is behind our firewall, behind our paywall, so I'd have to get a username and password that I can make available to you all. But at this point, we're very happy to make that available. It's still very rudimentary in nature, but it does give you a little bit of additional information as to, excuse me, what direction we're headed. And I can also say that while we're still committed to the September 2023 deadline for our PREA program. We are working well ahead of schedule, and I don't want to put a date on it specifically, but I can tell you that it will be hopefully well before September of next year. I do need to qualify that because inevitably something will go wrong that will set us back. It's just the nature of the beast. But even then, I think we're on target for a delivery well before that. Of course, we still have to go through the AQB approval process and all that, so that could take some time. But again, as it relates to the little video presentation that we've put together, I'm more than happy to make that available. So I appreciate the opportunity. So
Thank you, Scott. That's great news. Thank you.
I'll work with your staff to make that available.
Perfect. Thank you. We don't have any other requests for comments, so we will move on to agenda item number 6, which is the ratification of the official record of the August 19th, 2022 board meeting as approved for posting on the website by the Secretary of the Board. It can be found on page 11 in our materials. Any requested changes? If not, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Castro.
I move that the board ratify the minutes of the August 19th, 2022 board meeting.
I will second.
We have a motion by Mr. Castro and a second by Ms. Robinson. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 7 is the final orders and surrenders in the matter of complaint 22017 and 22420. They start on page 15 of your materials. We did not receive any any requests for public comment on either of these matters. No action is required by the board, but does anybody have any questions? Hearing none, we will move on to agenda item number 8, report by the Education and Licensing Committee. Mr. Castro, this committee report is on page 31 in our materials.
Madam Chair, I have nothing further to talk about other than just the continuing things about Perea and just that we've been discussing throughout the last couple of meetings. It's something that's in our purview, and it's something that we're making sure that is on our radar. And when these programs start kind of coming out and stuff, we'll definitely take a closer look at them. So.
Very good. I will note something that came up in the committee meeting that I thought was interesting, and I would just like to mention for the record. We asked staff to pull a figure for how many trainee applications expire without the person renewing. So we would assume that this is somebody who had done their education and applied for a trainee license and maybe was unable to find a sponsor or a supervisor appraiser, or for whatever reason decided not to renew and stay in the program. And so they pulled for fiscal year 2020 and 2021, and about 30 to 35% of the applicants did not renew. So that's a significant number. We had in 2020 we had 509 applications, and in 2021 we had 855. So 30 to 35% of those is a pretty significant number of people that clearly are showing interest in coming into the profession and drop out for whatever reason. And we had never seen that figure before, so I wanted to make sure that everybody was kind of aware of that. And I will and have shared some of that data with the AQB because they don't have that access to that type of information as well. Agenda item number 9 is the report by the Enforcement Committee. Mr. Bolton, this is on page 35 in our materials.
Madam Chair, I don't have anything in addition to the summary. I think it's a very complete summary of what we did.
Very good. The Executive Committee report is on page 39 in our materials. And I will just note that one of the things that we discussed is Director Tran continuing to try and find ways to increase efficiencies and increase transparency and fairness to our license holders. And so we talked about just some continued tweaks that we're doing on the enforcement side to process these in a more timely manner as well. And so we appreciate her continued efforts on that. Agenda item number 11 is the report by the AMC Advisory Committee. As Mrs. Reed Lynch is absent today, she asked me to speak on that. It's on page 43 in your materials. The main item was we had received a lot of comments about a rule for periodic reviews, which has been in place since the statute in 2011 or 12, and and a lot of the commenters were saying that it was a regulatory burden, and it hadn't really, increased quality or really changed in any kind of way. It was just sort of a checking the box, and it was a very expensive process for them to do to kind of check a box. So we're exploring ways to change that. They're also talking about making a legislative change. The professional organization that represents several AMCs is talking about doing that. So we look to see this spring if that happens, and of course we will, respond accordingly with our rules and our processes. So. Agenda item number 12 is a report by TREC and TALCB Joint Audit Committee, and Mr. McAnally is our member on that committee. The materials are on page 47. Is there anything that you would like to highlight for us, Mr. McAnally?
No, not at this time. I believe that the summary is a pretty good reflection.
Fantastic. Can you remind me who on the TREC side is on that committee with you?
I need some help on that. Ben, yes, Ben.
Commissioner Ben Pena, and then Jan Fight Miller.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm in board mode today.
Yeah,
I was like,
I
what are their
apologize.
names? I don't know.
And are those both broker members, or are they public members?
It's 1 and 1.
Okay, very good. Glad to know. Thank you so much. Thank you again for.
And if I may add,
Please.
Ben also has extensive auditing background, and he's the chair of this. So.
Very good.
Mm-hmm.
Good to know. We're always happy to have those people on our team. Agenda item number 13 is staff reports. These start on page 51 in your materials. Commissioner Buckholz.
Okay, I think I just turned the mic on. You can hear me, right? Good morning. Welcome back to Austin for the last meeting of 2022. Thank you for the good work you accomplished yesterday in our annual training and workshop. You covered a lot of ground in close to 5 hours of meeting. There was some great training and discussion on really just general training for the board, including Robert's Rules of Order, a robust discussion on bias and discrimination in appraisals. With a directive to staff, I want to note to bring ideas to the board on concrete ways that we can make progress in that regard. We're committed to that. And then also a discussion on how to better communicate with a complainant on their expectations of being part of the process. So other things were covered, but those are the points that came to mind as I was reflecting on yesterday. Again, there's a lot to cover today. Along with the regular staff reports, in your materials you will see year-end reports. At the end of our fiscal year was marked at the end of August, and so by now we have data that would show how we fared at the end of the year. So those are included in your reports if you have any questions on that. A few pieces of data from those reports I wanted to highlight. First, fiscal year 2022 ended with a total of 2,142 applications received. And this is an increase of 31% year over year between 2021 and 22. TALCB saw the biggest increase in the licensed residential appraisal applications, with a 64% increase from fiscal year 2021. Staff processed these applications, including the experience audits, within the timeline set by the board, which I think is particularly noteworthy. And I will say that was accomplished with two two things. We have more staff than we have in previous years, which helps for that increase. And then we also have made great efficiencies over the course of the last year, thanks to Melissa Tran's great work in just finding those efficiencies. So you heard a lot about that yesterday, and I'm really proud of her efforts in that regard. Fiscal year 2022 also ended with a total of 331 complaints received. This is an increase of 10% from the year before. Most of those complaints came from consumers at 68%, followed by government-sponsored enterprises at 19%. And those complaints were processed in an average of 136 days. If y'all have any questions on those staff reports, I am happy to try to answer, but I also have a team of folks who have all of the details behind me. In other news, here at TALCB, we are fully staffed. We have a new investigator, Mary Duffy, who started in the middle of November. She lives in the Houston area, so she's not with us here today. She's a certified residential appraiser with field and review experience. She's hit the ground running. She has extensive experience with Fannie Mae repurchase demands related to appraisals. So she's a great asset to our team, and are delighted that she has joined us. We also have some agency-wide staff news. As many of you know, Steve Rapp, our IT director, announced his retirement. And as of earlier this week, the end of November, he is officially retired. He served Trek and TALCB extremely well, and I'm very sad to see him go. However, I aspire to be in his shoes and wish him all the best in this new season of life for which he's worked extremely hard. I also want to introduce to you our new IT director. Most of you may recognize him, Tom Watson, who's behind me. If you can just wave, there you go. He served our agency for many years in various roles in the IT department. He helped lead our last database implementation and has great familiarity with all of our systems and our people. So he retired a few months ago, but then applied for the IT director position. And when I announced his return, his phone blew up with congratulations. I don't think there's a single person who's sad to see him return. So we're delighted for him to be part of our team again, and he will be a very helpful asset in the implementation of our new database, the RAMP system. In other updates, later today, y'all will provide some feedback to each other on your experience at the last Aero conference. I wasn't able to attend that conference. We did have several staff who were there, and they gave me a few reports that I wanted to just contribute to your conversation later today. From what they say, bias in appraisals was a hot topic, and that stakeholders continue to have conversations about how to best address the findings in the PAVE report. AQB is exploring changes to qualifying and continuing education requirements. And we expect lots of discussion on that in the coming months, especially once the exposure drafts are made public. Staff will stay on top of that and keep you up to date on that. Also, barriers to entry. Discussions about how to get more people into the industry and increase the diversity of who is in the industry. Many are optimistic that Appraiser will help, so we're watching for that. And then we also learned about Appraiser Diversity Initiative, a partnership between Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the Appraisal Institute, and the National Urban League. They provide workshops, scholarships, and many other services to aspiring appraisers. So Summer is actively working on working with Fannie Mae on communication effort related to that, to spread the news. And then Fannie Mae referrals. There was talk at Aero of the increase in Fannie Mae complaint referrals. And Fannie Mae announced to the states that we can expect an increase in referrals, and we have seen that, and we're monitoring that closely. So thanks to Kathleen Santos, Melissa Tran, and Jeff Strawmeyer from our staff who attended that, and we look forward to hearing from those of you who attended on your takeaways. A few other items I wanted to mention. AMC National Registry, the mandatory reporting opens in January. Mandatory notices went out November 1st, and we will continue those communications between now and when the reporting period closes. And then ASC grant, we received another $120,000 for this year's grant and are hoping for additional grant opportunities. We have been in touch with the ASC even as late as yesterday, where they told us that there has not been an ASC grant director named yet, but they expect that mid-January. And soon thereafter, they hope to put out a new notice of grant funding that would allow for additional opportunities for us. So we'll watch that closely. On behalf of staff, I wanted to also say just a special thank you for the inflation increases that you approved in this year's budget. That was at the last meeting you had. You approved the budget that included those inflation increases. Those increases went into effect in October, which means that at the beginning of November, they saw those increases in their paycheck. This makes a difference to many, to all. And I am grateful for your willingness to take care of our people. They are, of course, our richest resource. Lastly, the timing of appointments and reappointments is a bit of a black box. We never really know when that will happen. We make assumptions related to that, but we don't know. But Clayton Black and Rolando Castro's terms expire at the end of January. Clayton has served for 10 years. And Mr. Castro has served for a shorter amount of time. And based on just timelines, I am making assumptions that are my own that we may lose you, Mr. Black, and that we will likely keep you, Mr. Castro. This is my own assumption. But with that, I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you for your service. You don't get paid for this, and it takes a lot of time and effort and resource, and I appreciate your willingness to give back to the state of Texas and to this industry. It means a lot, and you each support this work and our staff beautifully, and so thank you.
It's been an honor for 10 years. I'll serve again if they want me to, but I don't expect to get reappointed because I've already been reappointed. I originally started with Rick Perry and so forth, but if that is the case, I'd be glad to come back February. I mean,
that sounds good. Well, that's really the reason I say this is that because of the timing, we just don't know when our public goodbye should be, and if it should be. But I wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you. And lastly, piggybacking on Chair Oates' comments, thanks to each of you in this holiday season for the work that you have done this year and the support you've provided to staff. We are in this season of gratitude grateful for each of you. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions and look forward to a great meeting.
Madam Chair, may I ask a couple questions?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you very much. That was a very good report, and I appreciate that. A couple things. You mentioned the diversity committee that's put together with the different groups that are coming together to try to handle the bias and diversity issue. Are we able to participate and give feedback in those sessions at all? Or are they able to speak to us as a board? Do we know?
I had a call with two people that oversee because I had the same questions. What is this? How can we be involved? And so I was able to set up a conference with two of the people at Fannie Mae that are in charge of the program, and just talk to them about our willingness to be involved. And basically they hold workshops all around the country. I want to say they have about 400 people currently in the program. They give scholarships for education, and then they try and match them with supervisors. And so that's where I thought that we could have our greatest impact. Was I asked if we could advertise that in our newsletter, because I thought, okay, now you have all these people that are ready to get supervisors, and that tends to be a problem area. So what can we do to help with that?
So the workshops are for people looking to get into the industry.
Correct.
And they're kind of walking them through that. That would be great if we could communicate that to our our fellow tech.
And so they take a panel of different industry people and go around to colleges in different places around the country and are actively recruiting people into the industry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay. So, great. So that's great information. I appreciate that. So I'll try to follow them a little bit closer and see how we can get involved if anything. And then let's see.
Well, and I did speak to them and ask them if it was possible that we would be interested in serving on a panel if they wanted to come to one of our HBCUs or Hispanic universities here in Texas, that we would definitely, want to be part of that. So.
Oh, wonderful. Great conversation. So thank you for that. And then let's see. I wanted to see if okay, so we did the inflation increase for our staff in October, which was awesome, great timing. And then can we speak to the other portion of the annual raise that's just on an annual basis?
Yes.
That we're
so
going to be looking at that.
those-
Yeah, I think it's a
Those
merit.
are
excuse me.
merit-based, and those are at the anniversary of each employee's current position. So when they have a performance evaluation after their year,
That's where we're coming
then that's part of that conversation. So
Okay.
it's just ongoing throughout the year.
Yes, thank you. And then the other thing I wanted to touch on, just because we did not have a chance to have a committee meeting for our financial folks, if we could do a brief review of where we ended last fiscal year. I know our last board meeting, we talked about where we expected to end, but if we could talk a little bit more, because I know that report came out of what the actual numbers were. So if we can kind of run through that real quick.
Walk through that.
And what page is that budget? I think there's a whole overview, right? I just don't know.
Which page? I'm sorry.
Are you ready to do that? Are you okay?
It's in,
Okay, I'll find it.
let's see.
I'm gonna
It's
let Ms.
just a staff
Williams
report.
provide that report.
Yeah.
I believe it's on page 85.
85, thank you.
Well, yeah.
I was in the,
You were at the beginning.
There we go. Thank you.
Right. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Chair Oates. Good
morning.
Robinson. For FY22, sorry, let me pull up my report. I know you had just a couple of questions about where we started and where we ended up. Let's see. So as a recap, we collected $3 million in revenue, which was approximately $742,500 more than what we originally projected. That's okay. Expenses were $1.9 million, which were approximately $65,206 more than the original projection, but that kind of offset with the revenue collection that we had. Our net operating gain was $1,125,936.
So here, I just want to remind the board that this was a great opportunity for us to be able to invest in staff and do different things. So, at this time was because we did have a really great fiscal year last year. And so that did give us an opportunity to do that. Also, as a reminder, it is our directive to make sure we are spending down our reserves and that we are not holding on to too much money in terms of the operating gains at the end of the year. And so that was a good opportunity to be able to invest in the staff. So as you see those numbers, keep in mind, I know we are supposed to be spending down and not holding on to, and that was why we were able to invest in our staff to help with more efficiencies, to give them what they needed to be more successful in their roles. So I just wanted to bring that up. So so if you guys see that big jump there, we are spending it.
Yes.
And then also what that's going to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, what that's also going to do is help cushion us for this fiscal year. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, we were expecting an operating loss.
Yes,
a
that
slight
is
loss
correct.
for this fiscal year, so brace yourselves for that, which I don't like to ever see operating loss, but I'm totally fine with it because we killed it last fiscal year. So,
Yes, ma'am.
so thank you for that. I just wanted to bring that to the board's attention.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that operating loss is always on our down opposite year, AMC year. At some point, we need to just renew half of them at 3 years or something, because isn't it? It just is so frustrating. There's always that asterisk, like, okay, this is why our years are so weird.
But it's nice. At least we're proactive, I think. Because I don't know. That is true. That is kind of frustrating sometimes. But I think we plan pretty proactively to kind of ride that out. And I think we did a great job with last fiscal year and this fiscal year, and able to to provide us an opportunity to do that. So so that's pretty cool. So great job on that for you and your team. I appreciate the work you guys have done.
Thank you, ma'am, and thank you for your guidance.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and obviously our huge increase in license holder fees in license applications was, why we were $350,000 off on that projection, which no one could have seen. And of course that change in the market also comes with more AMC fees too. And then, unexpected $236,000 in ASC grants. So you add all that up together, and it throws us way off, but, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it's a great problem to have, and then that's in terms of revenue. But if you look at our actual net, we did excellent in terms of savings and being efficient on our spending and all of that. So at the bottom line, we did a good job there too.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the efficiencies that Director Tran has found has kept us from having to correspond that increase in applicants with a significant amount of additional staff. So we appreciate that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions for Director Tran. Looking at page 98, if I could just make a request for the end of the year, so August 22 is August is the end of our fiscal year, and so I know that the enforcement committee at their last meeting, their meeting materials show all of the end of the year figures. This is our first board meeting, and so this page shows 18 complaints because it's only September, and that's really not a data point that I think that is useful to anyone, for 1 month. And so I would just like for our November meeting to put the August, even if we have to do both, to put the August end of the year data in there so that collectively we can see how this whole snapshot for our last fiscal year. So if we could just make that change going forward. And then I wanted to note on the following page, on page 99, for September, our complaint resolution time, and I think that the commissioner mentioned this, if you'll see for September, it was down to 102 days. And considering the number of complaints that we had last year, the fact that we have been able to bring it down so far, our goal is 180 days. So you can see over the last several months, we've been up close to that, and we have been able to, Director Tran and her staff have been able to bring that back down to 102 days, that's pretty low historically, so we certainly recognize that and appreciate that effort. On the following page, on page 100, the 0 to 6 month complaints are down from what they have been, historically in the last year or two. But the 6 to 9 month and 9 to 12 month complaints we've seen a significant increase there. I know it's only 6 and 26, but compared to what we've had, it's higher than. Can you speak to those lingering complaints?
For the over 12 months one, all of those are in abatement, right? So those we don't touch until they come off of whatever abatement they're on. For the 9 to 12 months, those are typically the ones that are more complex, like the ones that go to PIC, and then after they come back, we negotiate them. Mm-hmm.
So was the process different prior? I mean, what specifically?
Or is it just the increase, so it's just kind of pushing all the numbers up?
I think it's just the increase that's pushing the numbers up. But if you see anything in 9 to 12, a lot of times those are the more complex ones that we're dealing with.
Okay. Nothing for us to be concerned about in a resource allocation way. Okay, good to know. That was the only questions that I have. I'm glad to see that we don't have anything over a year old that's not in abatement. Yeah. That's good.
May I just add to that? First thing, great job. I'm so wowed by our staff and by your leadership, and because I've seen how it was before and where we are today, and it's truly amazing. And I just thank you guys for working so hard. And I know personally how hard you worked for all of that. So and your team. So I appreciate that. We may talk about this later, but I did have a quick question in the material that I know we were partnering with TWC for the housing. Now, do you foresee that process affecting our complaint timeframes at all?
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, because it's going to a different agency, coming back to us, we're collaborating. How do you see that working with our complaint?
Yeah, that's a
timeframes?
great question. And how does that process, have y'all talked about how that process would work?
Yeah, so we have talked about how the process works, but we're still trying to figure it out because it's new for both of us.
Yes.
And so when we get a complaint that alleges appraisal bias, we'll refer it to TWC. They'll do their investigation. They also work really closely with HUD. One of the things that we're trying to figure out is how we want to handle the cases as we wait for them. So right now we're kind of in wait and see mode because we want to see like how long does it take them to complete their investigations, and they have no idea at this point because it's new to them too.
So that's, and I read the agreement we had with them, right? And it was a great initial agreement, but I do think at some point we want to specify timelines and expectations on that, because I don't want that to fall negatively on our agency. I think the partnership itself is great, and the fact that we're bringing them in on their expertise, but I just don't want our complaint numbers to be negatively affected. So I don't know, maybe at some point we can look at the agreement and just, excuse me, I've had a little drainage this morning, but too much information. But maybe we can look at how to put more definitive timelines on, at some point, maybe later on.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, because if you have one or two cases that lingers for a while, that can bring your average way up, and then we're way out of our 180 days, and then it looks like, so yeah, that's
So we can keep our hand on that very closely. The other thing I noticed in that agreement is that I think it was that our agency will provide training upon request on an annual basis. I feel it's important that we train them annually, mandatory, just to keep them abreast of our industry and what's going on. And then I also think it's important that we train their new hires. So as they're coming on that team and looking at our cases, I want to make sure those new hires are also being properly trained before they start taking on our cases. So if that's something we can keep in mind if we are to redraft the agreement, that would be good. But complaint times, if you can keep us posted on how that's going to look and affect, how you would project that's going to affect your numbers there.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit tricky, trying to hold a different agency to
Right.
processing times, but I think that we have ways for which we can work within how we manage those cases to account for the time.
Yeah.
And it's all new, so it's going to be a learning curve, I think, that first year especially. But we can just tweak it as we go. But I just didn't want that to negatively affect your group. Yeah, thank you.
Melissa, so in recognizing my absence, this may have already been answered yesterday, but can you give us at least a brief overview of how that process is going to work? And I guess what I'm looking for is this a recommendation, or is the Texas Workforce Commission going to be kind of like an expert, outside expert, or how does that relationship work?
On their side of it, whenever they get a referral from anybody, or if they get any complaints, what they do is they have to send the complaint to HUD first, because there's dual jurisdiction in a lot of these matters. Federal and state fair housing laws are implicated. If HUD waives jurisdiction on their end, that's when TWC will take over and investigate on their side of it. If it's a protected class that is recognized federally but not state, HUD will take over, right? So that's why it makes it even more complicated to try to figure out how long it'll take for them to process the complaints. Once they figure out who's going to look at the complaint, they investigate it, and then they resolve it on their end. And what we get is the final outcome.
And I'm sorry.
So if that's the case, if it becomes, so essentially it's not our jurisdiction, but we're referring the case to their jurisdiction. So it would seem to me that it wouldn't affect our investigation times if it's just a referral.
Are we concluding our investigation before we make the referral?
So I think that's kind of the wait and see, because it does fall under our jurisdiction, because USPAP says that you cannot appraise with bias, right? But there's like so many layers there. I think that's the wait and see. So we kind of wanted to see, we've sent 5 cases of them now, and we wanted to see how long it takes for them to resolve those cases before we made a decision on what to do on our end. With turn times in mind, what we didn't want to do is like maybe kick out a dismissal and then turn around and then have to take action based on something that, for purposes of, just to make it clear for the respondents.
And are we sending any complaint that mention, are there keywords? How do we know which ones we're sending to them?
Anything that alleges bias based on a protected class.
Okay.
Could we consider the time that it's being investigated, whether by TWC or HUD, as an abatement on our part?
Yeah, we could do something like that, yeah.
I think that makes sense because it's through no fault of our own. We need to wait until this other investigation is completed before we make our own determinations.
But we want to make sure too that the respondents understand that it's elsewhere. You know, if you're notified that you have a complaint filed against you, right, and you're, you know, losing sleep over it, and then which is why we track this, right, because we want to be fair to our license holders. And so if it's out of our hands, then they should know that, but know that it's not really closed on our
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Please.
Yesterday at the workshop, we talked about the notice of complaint. This would be an opportunity for us to say, because this involves federal issues and possibly HUD concerns, we're transferring at this time the case over for that investigation. I think that, you know, one of the big things that we talked about yesterday was that people don't understand that it's not going to be a trial and witnesses and all that kind of stuff, that it's simply an investigation. But if we don't want to get shelled with bad info from these people, then I think we need to make them aware if the case is being transferred or sent forward, or however you would refer to it. And then it would also, I think, make the complainant feel better. Oh, they're sending this up. And just give them some more knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's exactly spot on. We're trying to figure out how to get the communications right. It's a complicated process, and we just have to communicate it in a way that makes sense to everybody involved.
Yeah, and because somebody might file a complaint and allege bias, they would probably want to know that that's going to greatly delay the resolution of the case, just so that they're, you know, when some of the feedback we get is this took a really long time, and that's going to take even longer, and so that we just need to manage those expectations.
Madam Chair, quick question that says, so the 5 that you have referred out, they haven't received any kind of notification at this point that they've been referred out, correct?
If they would have only on the ones that are closed or the ones that they don't open, they'll send a notice to the complainant.
Okay.
And so that's part of it. Like, we want to work on our notices to make sure that they know the complainant and the respondent if it's getting sent outwards.
So does that mean that the federal investigations or HUD investigations are covert or no?
I honestly don't know how the HUD investigations work, but I can follow up with them and see how they do it. But I know that TWC, if they open a complaint, they send out notices.
But going back to what we were talking about, how do we handle this when it gets referred over? I may be missing the boat here, but when we have complaints that then turn into fraud, I mean, does that give us any kind of roadmap of how we would handle with the interaction? Would it be similar with TWC on their end?
How we would so if something was found, you're asking, I'm sorry, I don't think I understand.
Okay, so we get in a complaint and then it turns out to be fraud, so it's going to go through the judicial system, right? Okay. Is there any similarity to that as is if we see discrimination and it goes over to TWC, it goes down their pathway? I mean, it seems like there's a parallel there in how we account for that, how we count the days, how we count what they're doing, what we're doing. It seems like that would be a good roadmap to emulate, is how we handle the fraud cases, would be something similar we could handle on these discrimination issues.
Like when we have a fraud case, does that goes to the feds and lasts forever, does that count on our time? So we could use the same process, or?
Yeah, I think those cases are just a little bit different because in the cases that involve fraud, we do the investigation and we close our case and then it's referred to them. In this situation, we're relying on them to do an investigation. So it makes it a bit more complex.
Yeah. We need to visit.
So when they give us their decision, TWC, when they give us their decision, do we discipline based on that decision, or do we have the authority to say, okay, I agree here, does our agency have the final word on that?
Our agency has the final word on the administrative action on the license.
Okay.
So whatever comes back, it'll be a case-by-case basis.
Okay. Good. Okay. Yeah, well, I appreciate the initiative in doing that. I think it's a great first step in moving us forward in the right direction. I totally expect this first year of trial and error and all of those great things that we see as we grow. If you could just keep us posted on how things are going. I'm interested in the first 5 cases we've sent already and how that's going to go. And we'll tweak it until we get it right. But thank you for taking that initiative.
Sure thing.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Very good. Does anybody have any other questions for Director Tran? Thank you. Agenda item number 14 is discussion of possible action to adopt amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 159. These have been published in the Texas Register, and we did not receive any public comment on them. Today they are before the board again for adoption. Starting on page 101 in your materials, Ms. Santos.
Good morning, Madam Chair, board members, Kathleen Santos, General Counsel. As Madam Chair mentioned, agenda item number 14, discussion and possible action to adopt amendments to 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 159. And these individual sections are outlined more specifically in your materials on page 101. Just some highlights on the amendments that are for adoption. These are the last chapter of our quadrennial rule review, I'm happy to report. And as many of the other amendments, these are to simply simplify and clarify as needed and take out outdated language. But just a few high points. We're amending our rule in 159.3 to extend the date for the AMC Advisory Committee, clarifying language in our fees, and then also clarifying some language to better reflect or to be in compliance with our appraisal subcommittee policy as far as verifying ownership with eligibility for the AMCs. And that really is just sort of a language change, doesn't involve any process change at all. And then finally, 159.201, there's some changes in this rule that sort of also reflect changes that are in our complaint processing rule on the appraiser side and the order of operation of who can sign an order when the chair is unavailable. We did receive 4 comments, and these are the comments that Madam Chair referenced in the AMC Advisory Committee report. None of the comments directly addressed our proposed changes, but because I'm mentioning it here because it affected this particular chapter. And in the committee discussion, that was sort of brought up that this chapter is in the middle of quadrennial rule review. And with that in mind, the AMC Advisory Committee didn't have any recommendations for our proposed language and offered to offer any recommended changes after this chapter closes. So for that reason, we have no recommended changes to the language as proposed. And staff's recommendations here is to adopt the amendments as published.
Very good. Does anyone have any questions? If not, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair, I'll form that motion. I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to submit for adoption amendments to 22 TAC 159.1, 159.3, 159.52, 159.102, 159.03, 159.105, 159.109, 159.201, and 159.204 as published, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for adoption.
Second.
Mr. Bolton, would you like to read that motion that you just seconded?
Madam Chair, no, I would not.
We have a motion by Mr. Black and a second by Mr. Bolton. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 15 is executive session. We don't currently have any items that we need to get legal counsel on litigation or personnel matters, and so I don't have a need for executive session unless I hear otherwise from the board members. So we will be moving on to agenda items number 16 and 17 that we will consider together. These start on page 117 of your materials. Ms. Santos.
Thank you. Agenda items number 16 and 17, discussion and possible action to propose the repeal of 22 TAC 153.24 complaint processing and to propose new 22 153.24 complaint processing and 153.241 sanctions guidelines. The reason why these two are being presented together is we're asking to repeal 153.24 and we're breaking it into two rules, and that would create the new 153.24 and the new 153.241, which would just be the sanctions guidelines out of the old rule. And staff's recommendations here is to propose the repeal of the old rule and propose the two new rules as presented.
Does anybody have any questions? This was sort of on our to-do list for a long time, of breaking up that very large and cumbersome rule. So this is just finally getting to that. If not, I'll hear a motion.
Madam Chair,
Mr. Bolton.
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of the board to submit the repeal of Chapter 22, Texas Administrative Code, 153, Tech 24, and submit new rules, 22, Texas Administrative Code, 153.24, and 153.241, as presented for publication and public comment to the Texas Register, along with any technical or non-substantive changes as required for a proposal.
I'll second.
We have a motion by Mr. Bolton and a second by Ms. Robinson. Any questions, discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 18 is the discussion possible action to close review of 22 Texas Administrative Code. This is on page 127 in your materials. Ms. Santos.
Yes, so this is the final act of closing the review of Chapter 159 in accordance with Texas Government Code Section 2001.039, and with the amendments the board adopted in item 14 in this chapter, this completes the review. Staff's recommendation here is to close the review of this chapter as presented.
And when would we start this process again?
Technically
In
every 4
February?
years, but the
February?
long-term plan is to not do all of this in a single year, but to break it up every few years.
Very good. Very good. Does anybody have any other questions for Ms. Santos? If not, I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Robinson.
I move that staff is authorized on behalf of this board to close the review of 22 Texas Administrative Code, Chapter 159, rules relating to the provisions of the Texas Appraisal Management Company Registration and Regulation Act.
I second.
We have a motion by Ms. Robinson and a second by Mr. Castro. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 19 is discussion regarding the fiscal year 2022 annual internal audit report and fiscal year 2023 and 2024 annual internal audit plan. This is on page 133 of your materials. I believe Ms. Williams is going to walk us through this. And if, Mark, if you have any additional comments from the audit committee, please feel free to
Yes, ma'am.
weigh in.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Board, Renata Williams, Chief Financial Officer. The Joint Audit Committee approved the FY22 Internal Audit Report, which was submitted to the Office of the Governor on November the 1st. They also approved the FY23-24 Internal Audit Plan. The internal auditors were present at the commission meeting on November 7th and gave an overview of both of these documents, and there were no additional discussions. Would you like for me to go into more detail about the documents, or do you all have any additional questions?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. If you could just give us a high level.
Okay. Let me pull up my additional notes. Give me one quick second, sorry. I'm getting there, sorry, but it's moving a little slow. I know, right? I should have brought the tablet instead of the laptop.
We're all learning to use our technology.
So the first document that we had was the internal audit report for FY22, and with this document, like I mentioned, it was sent to the Office of the Governor, the LBB, the Legislative Budget Board, the Sunset Commission, and to the State Auditor's Office. And they provide a report of all of the audits that they performed last year during FY22 and what the status of those audits were. So they completed the asset management audit, an accounting and finance audit, and human resources follow-up. And then they kind of give an outline of what was going on in any issues or any findings that we have. So let's see here. For the internal audit, the asset management portion of the audit. Let's see. I am so sorry. This is not very clear on here. It just says completed. I thought this also included an overview of the findings, if there were any additional findings, but apparently it does not.
That's what I was looking for. I see on page 136 where it shows what they looked at and the dates and that it's completed, but I was looking for
And
more.
I can provide you a follow-up with additional information because
that'd be
there
great.
were a couple of findings with the asset management in regards to our SOP process. We need to streamline our SOP. We need to clean up some things. They gave us several recommendations on how we can just better align our processes with the state of Texas processes. And then with the accounting and finance audit that looked at our reconciliation process, there were some findings on that as well, where we just needed to make sure that when we changed our processes and updated them, we actually put a date on them. So it wasn't anything that was like a major high risk or anything. It was just low level
Best practices.
items.
Okay.
Yeah, but I can find you, I will send you all a copy of those final audit reports so that you can see.
And so when they make these recommendations, it's typically something that's handled by TREC, right? Because I don't recall us ever getting them. I mean, I imagine it affects the same, because we all share the same accounting and
Yes, ma'am.
HR and all that. So that's probably why we never see the recommendations and have to take action on them. Is that correct?
That is correct, ma'am.
Okay.
But I can provide you all a copy of those audit reports.
Yeah, that'd be great if you don't mind doing that. And then when we make those changes, what's our process for monitoring and maintaining that those changes stay in place, or is it just whenever they come back?
Well, what we do is we have them do a follow-up audit to make sure that we've implemented the recommendations based off of their recommendations, our management responses, and make sure that we're adhering to what we said we were going to do. So, for instance, you see they have a human resources follow-up. That was a follow-up from a 2018 audit that they did. So they come back a couple of years later just to make sure that we have, in fact, done what we said we would do.
Show data over time that you've done that. And then I apologize if it's in here and I missed it. Did they give us an official rating on this? Were we excellent, good?
No, ma'am. I don't
No official
think
rating on
there is
that?
official rating in regards to this report.
We want a grade.
We do. We want to know we're doing great. Thank you very much. I appreciate the detail and look forward to the follow-up.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
You can tell
I'm-
Stephanie and I sat at the front of the class, right? We need a grade.
If I may add on the future audit though, and it is in point 3 in the report, but just to bring it out, is that the committee decided that we needed to emphasize more of their time now. They've been on the compliance with the Public Fund Investment Act, and at least from where I come from in auditing, a recommendation is a nice recommendation. It's different than a finding, where a finding includes that they sense that there could be some risk if this action is not corrected. Where recommendation is they can come back more and say, okay, yes, you did date the proper documents, that you overlooked. So that was the reason that the audit committee came back and said, now we need to reallocate their time and spend more time. And those are they'll be spending more time looking at human resources, IT security. We felt like that was essential, and then follow up on any of the open audit findings that were presented in the last report.
And so
that's
those
where
are
we
the
were.
things that are on tap for 23 and 24?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. So what we did was we shifted their allocated time to those measures that we thought were things that were at risk, since we looked at and we saw what they were looking at in the previous audit, and we felt like that was good enough. So we needed to look at areas that this committee thought were high risk items at this time, like IT security.
Oh, fantastic. Very good. Thank you. Very good. Okay, we will look forward to those findings and have any follow-up if necessary on that. Agenda item number 20 is the report on the Fall Aero Conference. So I attended, and I just have a couple of highlights that I thought were interesting from the meeting. I learned, and this might be common knowledge already, but it wasn't to me, that future use PAPs won't have an end date. So I guess they'll have a start date, and that's something new for all of us, especially those of us that have been doing this for a really long time, right, Joe? So, which is good, because this extended current use PAP is kind of a reporting nightmare for us appraisers. Something else I wanted to note is that the Appraisal Foundation reinstituted the State Regulatory Advisory Group, and I don't know when it was last around, but this is something they've reinstituted, and it's a forum for discussion between the foundation, its boards, and state regulators. And they meet virtually, and so I would like to figure out if the state regulator portion, is that just staff, is that board members, do they want them on the advisory group, and when are those opportunities coming, and how can somebody from Texas participate if necessary. So want to definitely look into those and be a part of them if it's a fruitful useful time for us. The Appraisal Foundation, and I didn't know this, has a podcast, and they have these podcast episodes that are like 3 to 5 minutes long, and some of the topics are things like, can a client reassign my appraisal report, or does Dodd-Frank prohibit trainees from inspecting a property by themselves for a lender? So there are these questions that come up all the time, and they're only 3 to 5 minutes, so that's pretty easy to digest. And we might even consider putting those in the newsletter, or letting people know, making our license holders aware that that's out there. But also, if there were questions that license holders or we have that they could cover in the podcast, we could consider that as well. Also, the FHA's Appraiser Diversity Initiative that we've already spoken about, I learned that it started in 2018 as just an awareness campaign, but they have obviously, made it a much more robust program, and they have scholarships. So they're giving scholarships to a diverse group of people to come into the profession. So I thought that's great. And to mention that the Spring Aero Conference is in Savannah, Georgia, but it's a Monday through Thursday, which is kind of an odd, hard time for all of us working folk to go there. But and so it's May 8th through 11th. I think I have this. Yeah. Is that as many? Okay. Did anybody from staff? I know you kind of went over some stuff, so there, I assume that was, yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about Arrow?
That virtual, oh, excuse me. I'm sorry, Madam Chair. The virtual state regulation, that sounds great. So what is that called again? Is it official?
Yeah, it has an official title called the State Regulatory Advisory Group.
And so
Did anybody get any further information on that and what the purpose of it is, or what they're trying to accomplish with that committee?
This doesn't answer the question you just asked, but Kat and I were talking about, we have been invited to one of those, and we had a conflict. It was like a committee meeting day or something that we couldn't.
So it's not a static committee?
Do you know if it's a static? We'll find out.
We'll find out. Okay.
Yeah. We'll send it out. Yeah. We saw it more as a forum.
Right. Okay. I see it. Yeah, it does say that is how I have it here listed as a forum for discussion. Okay. But yeah, maybe figure out what the topics are and if they're something that we as board members want to participate in or something that we could advertise to license holders to participate in.
Also, Madam Chair, was there a mention of I think it was a veteran scholarship for veterans? Did I remember that correctly?
That doesn't sound familiar.
Okay. All right. I could have sworn there was a scholarship program for veterans to get into the industry or something like that.
Maybe the ADI, maybe the Appraiser Diversity Initiative might have.
I thought that was awesome.
Yeah,
to
okay.
help our veterans get in.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, thank you for reminding me.
That would be great.
That. Yes, that is exactly right. Yeah, that is part of that program, so.
Madam Chair, as I attended the Aero conference, I found it, and of course I was probably looking at it, and my impressions were a lot more longer term than near term, but I really enjoyed it because I had the chance to really understand about the discrimination issue as well as the PREA, and it seems like that this is a very crucial time in the profession since I saw licensing and certification become mandatory. We have the discrimination matter that we're addressing on one end. PREA is to help with recruiting and getting more individuals into our profession because we are an aging workforce as far as appraisals are concerned, and you can do that, and it also enhances and increases diversity as well. But the other thing, and I know that there's a lot of great and brilliant minds addressing this, but it's a lot of heavy lifting, and I acknowledge the Appraisal Institute is doing a lot of heavy lifting on the PREA side of the equation, and it's going to be fascinating to see how this fits because. Artificial intelligence is on the horizon and it's moving on through. I know the Department of Defense is embracing it and using it and experimenting with it. I think that we should encourage the appraisal profession to do the same as well. It will help our clients and increase our efficiencies and our turnaround time. And just as going forward, probably many years down the road, with the advent of artificial intelligence, it probably will change our procedures and our practices as well, which would correspondingly change our standards. Mm-hmm. And so, that old axiom, well, this is the way we've always done it, I think we need to lose that idea and lose that really quick. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, and I will point out that, and I would assume this is probably true for staff as well, that some of the benefits of Aero are the conversations that you have between the classes and the little tidbits of information that kind of give you a better insight into the way our federal oversight agencies work together or, work covering different things, and it just sort of helps you to clarify all the things that we do, why those are happening, from top down. So I definitely find that useful. Any other questions about Aero or comments? Okay, agenda item number 21 is discussion and possible action regarding nominations to create a slate of candidates for the offices of vice chair and secretary of the board. So today we will create the slate, and at the February meeting we will hold the vote. As a reminder, by statute, the vice chair serves as the chair of the AMC Advisory Committee. The floor is open for nominations.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Bolton.
I nominate Martha Gale Reed Lynch for a reappointment as the vice chair, and Mark McAnally as the secretary of the executive committee.
Okay, do we have any other nominations? We can still take nominations on the floor at the February meeting, so if there are any other desires or changes, we can hear it then. Thank you, Mr. Bolton. And the next item is Mr. Slagle. Discussion and possible action regarding legislative initiatives, and these start on page 151 in your materials.
I think this is on. Good morning, Madam Chair, board members. Tony Slagle, Deputy Commissioner. I'm going to talk about the legislative initiatives for the board. I think the best way to do this is just go over the initiatives we've spoken about and then talk about what's on the fly sheet and the recommendation from staff. So I think I'll start off just mentioning, while it's not an initiative of ours, since Madam Chair brought it up during the AMC committee, we are following and aware that there may be some legislative changes dealing with the periodic review of appraisers for AMCs. So we are aware that there may be something out there. We're monitoring that. Nothing's been filed yet that we're aware of. And we have discussed, also for your information, we have discussed these initiatives with FACT and with ATA both, and talked to them for two reasons. One, to see if they had any issues with what we were talking about, and also to see what their feedback was on anything they were going to be bringing forward for the session. So we have spoken to stakeholders as well. So I'll just go ahead, and if there's not any questions about that particular issue, I'll talk about the initiatives that we have talked about as an agency. The first one is an initiative relating to study guides. As you all know, there's currently a requirement that the board develop study guides for the exam. This is old language that was in the statute as a result of the board actually drafting the exams at one point. We no longer do that. It's a federal exam. It's outdated language, so the recommendation is to repeal that particular requirement. The next three items deal with experience requirements. There is, sorry, I keep doing that. There is, currently there's language that could potentially be in conflict with PIRAEA, and what I mean by that is there's language in 1103-201 that requires somebody to be licensed in order to do an appraisal. And so in order to make sure that that's clear for somebody coming in through PIRAEA, because they would not be licensed, but they would be technically doing appraisals under that program, we're going to clean that language up to make sure that conflict is removed, any potential conflict with a statute is removed. Any questions about that before I move on? Okay. The next one is there's currently in the statute language that requires experience to be gained as a mortgage lending officer or a real estate broker. The way that is currently drafted, there's an implication that that does not need to be USPAP compliant, and so we want to make sure that while there's provisions elsewhere in the statute where that experience can be accepted, that we want to make sure that if it is provided to us, that it is USPAP compliant, because it needs to be in order for it to be counted towards experience. So that's another cleanup provision. Any questions about that one? Okay, and the third experience requirement related initiative is currently in the statute, an applicant is required to provide an affidavit that states that they have met the required experience hours. That's not required by the AQB. It's outdated. It's overly burdensome. So staff has seen that as something that we could remove from the statute and just no longer require that affidavit to be provided and signed when an applicant is providing experience requirements. Okay. If there's no questions about that, there's two other items I would like to discuss. One is we received We received an email from DPS. DPS is requesting all agencies through which they facilitate background checks to tweak their language to get in compliance with a new interpretation. It wouldn't change anything that we do, wouldn't change any rules, it wouldn't change anything we do, but there's language that needs to be added to our statute that conforms with language they need in order to continue to facilitate that process. So, and it's not just us, it's any agency they do background checks for. And then the very last item is there's been some discussion from staff wanting to add a PIC review process for AMCs. There's currently a PIC review process, as all of you know, in 1103 for appraisers. Staff feels that that would help facilitate the complaint process on the AMC side. So thinking about moving forward and having a PIC review process on the in the AMC statute as well. Any questions about any of that before I go on with the staff recommendation on the legislative initiatives? I would like to say that just for your information, and we've already started tracking bills. There's not any appraiser related bills we're really tracking as of right now. We're tracking about 66 bills. Early filing was November 15th. The session starts on Tuesday, January 10th. So, you know, we'll continue to start tracking those bills. We will provide an update to you as board members on a regular basis in terms of bills that we are tracking that impact the board, and obviously facilitating the discussion you guys want to have about that. But I just wanted to put that out there as well.
When will we have language ready for these changes?
So we have, thank you for that, Madam Chair. We have talked with a couple of sponsors, one on the Senate and one on the House side, who are willing to carry any legislation we have. Staff's currently working on drafting that language to provide to them. There's a process by which they'll then send it to Leg Council to get cleaned up, and then Leg Council will bring it back to them and they'll file the bill at that point.
Okay. Seeing as how we're, maybe 45 days from the start of the session, I would like to, because I know that, of course, we come up with the language and then Leg Council has to look at it. A lot of times we will, ask for feedback from ATA, in fact, and Appraisal Institute, or anyone who might come to the, committee hearings and testify, or might, weigh in on the language, so that at some point we can, as a board, say whether or not we agree with, whatever it is that we're, putting forth. And so how can we make that happen simultaneously? If we come up with the language and then we give it to any of the professional organizations that would weigh in, and the board members, maybe the executive committee, or how can we make that happen? We all know that if you don't get a bill filed pretty quickly, that the chances of it passing are pretty slim.
Yeah, right. You're right about that. So essentially, the way the process works, or has worked in the past, is there's a designee for the board to weigh in on any sort of things that happen between the board meetings. Since the board only meets quarterly and the legislative session, there's a lot happening and it happens very quickly. The board has designated a designee to talk with staff and be the facilitator for those things and basically help to move that process along. Okay. So in the past, it's been the chair. Doesn't have to be. It could be the executive committee, but just something that gives us a little bit more flexibility to meet with a smaller group of people to ensure that we're able to move that process along rather than have to convene the entire board together.
Very good.
So that would be staff's recommendation, is to move forward with, if you're okay with these initiatives, give the approval for us to move forward with the initiatives that we laid out that are the board initiatives, and then also give a recommendation is to give delegate the authority to work with somebody on the board to move forward with that during the session. And
did you have additional initiatives that you wanted to add? I felt like you were about to get into another section.
No, ma'am. That is it as of right now. We're aware of some other things that that don't necessarily impact the authority of the board, but are other initiatives that, like FACT is moving through, and they work. We communicate very well with them in terms of that, but they're not anything that impact what the board does. But they always say, "Hey, do you have any issues with this or anything like that?" Just to make sure that there's not any roadblocks.
Yeah. Okay.
Madam Tony.
Yes, sir.
And it sounds like everything you've laid out in front of us legislatively is housekeeping.
Yes, sir.
It's revenue neutral.
Yes, sir.
So it's not going to require additional monies or,
No, sir.
even though we're self-funded, I know that, but those are things that I know they ask. So I just wanted to bring that out, that it appears that we're revenue neutral, just trying to clean up things that are no longer applicable to our business.
Correct, and there was no pushback from any of the stakeholders, which is also good, because the last thing you want to do is get a bill filed and then have people come up at a hearing and say, this is horrible, we don't like this, and they're fine with everything we've discussed.
Madam Secretary? Madam Chair, I demoted you. I certainly didn't mean to do that.
The chair does not recognize you.
I don't recognize me sometimes. Mr. Slagle, last time, did you not serve as our legislative representative from staff? Weren't you appointed to that by this board?
Well, no, I've always been up until about 2 years ago. I was the government relations person, and then when I became the deputy commissioner, I kept that role on just because we didn't have a designee for it. But Summer Mandel, who is out there, is now helping with that and sort of taking the lead on a lot of the government relations stuff. But what we're asking is to have a policymaker involved, so that if something comes up and we need to talk to somebody on the board, that can give staff direction that, okay, yeah, this change is likely okay, or no, it's not, or, oh, we need to have a bigger conversation about this. And so last session, I believe that was the chair. I think the chair was designated to do that. Again, that doesn't have to be, it could be the executive committee or whoever, but that's how it's always worked, just so we have a policymaker to help us facilitate that process.
Great, okay. I just didn't want to demote you too, so. Thank you.
No, I'm involved. I go to the hearings. I testify if asked to, as does the commissioner, to do that as well. But
yeah, and I'm happy to serve in that role again. I worked on the AMC legislation many years ago and served as an executive with FACT for a lot of years. So I have a working relationship with all of them and have testified and done all of those things. So I'm happy to be the point of contact on the board. Does anybody have any other questions? Would it be appropriate, although designating one person as the point of contact, I know Ms. Reed Lynch has been, with FACT and involved in a lot of legislative changes in the past, and of course, he was a bill change was sort of why he's even sitting here. So, so I think that we all have something to offer. Would it be appropriate to have the executive committee be provided with the language, and then sort of speak with one when it's time sensitive for it to be coming to just me, but kind of the language being vetted by all three of us?
sorry, did you want to speak to that, Chelsea?
We're happy to do that, and that works well now. As things change, they tend to change quickly. Between 5 p.m. and 10 p.m.
Yep.
And so it's pretty fluid. And when that's the case, we can keep you informed, tell you plans, bounce ideas off of you, that sort of thing. But between now and about February, there's an ease to sharing information to the executive committee and to you. And then that doesn't, I think each of you have something to offer to so much of what happens during the legislative session is, like you mentioned at the Aero conference, kind of between meetings or between hearings and behind the scenes. And I think that's where we absolutely rely on you to have conversations and for us to just share information about what conversations are occurring. The hearings tend to be, they're formal opportunities to share agreements that have already seemingly occurred, if that makes much sense. So if to the extent you want to be involved in that, we can include you. To the extent you want us to handle that, on the track side, staff does that wholly.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that has to happen on the board side too.
Yeah, and I think it makes sense for Tony will know when he needs to reach out, and when we've had enough conversations that he knows what it is that the board wishes to happen. So
depends on the issue, it seems, and
Sure.
just
yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
So yeah, we just need a motion again if you want to move forward with the initiatives as laid out. And just to reiterate, because I did kind of talk around them, it's the repeal of the study guides, the 3 experience requirements, which are clarifying the language regarding additional types of experience to make sure there's no conflict, that you don't have to be licensed to gain that experience, the removal or the clarification that experience provided by a broker, whoever needs to be USPAP compliant, and then the repealing the affidavit requirement, and then a possible PIC review process for AMCs. Oh, and the DPS language. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
So those are the board staff recommended initiatives.
Very good. Anybody have any other items that they would like to add to that, or any changes that they want to make to that list? If not, if there are no other questions, then I will hear a motion.
Madam Chair,
Ms. Robinson.
I move that the board direct staff to proceed with the legislative initiatives as presented and appoint you as our chair to serve as the contact person and representative for legislative matters.
Second.
We have a motion by Ms. Robinson and a second by Mr. Castro. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. Thank you so much, Mr.
Sure, and I just want to also state that if anybody has any questions as the process is going on, reach out to me. You can reach us to Summer or to Chelsea, and we'll make sure that we answer any questions you have about anything you see or hear out there. So,
Very good.
thank you.
Items number 23 and 24, the discussion drafts have not been published, and so there is nothing for us to discuss there. We will, as soon as they come out, we will, of course, take a look at them and see if there's anything that we need to convene a committee to discuss, or take some sort of action to provide public comment or comment to the agencies. Agenda item number 25, discussion and possible action regarding agenda items for future meetings. Do we have anything currently on our list? Anything that, nothing notable. Very good. Agenda item number 26 is discussion and possible action to schedule future meeting dates. So the calendars are on the last page of your materials. We previously set a date of February 3rd and May 19th for our next 2 board meetings, and staff has asked that we go ahead and set a date for the August meeting. So if you will look at the August calendar, those of us with children in school, consider the start date of school will probably be somewhere between the 14th and 25th, so that the 18th or 25th might be a good date. I didn't see any conflicts. We don't know when the TREC meeting is yet for that time, do we? I didn't see it on their board schedule. They haven't scheduled August, okay. So what about August 18th? This point? The 7th and 8th probably for them, or definitively. That would probably be the 7th and 8th. Okay, so that would be a good, the 18th would work then for us. Okay, perfect. So let's set the tentative date as Friday, August 18th. Clayton's not even putting it on his calendar over there.
Hey, I'll be glad to come back. No, I'll put it down, but
You might still be around.
if I'm not reappointed, I mean, I'll.
You're not coming. You're not coming.
No.
You're not showing up. Okay, very good. Okay, that was the quickest meeting I believe that we have ever had. That is my holiday gift to all of you.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair.
So the time is 10:35, and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, and everybody be safe and happy holidays.